Hi, and welcome back. This is part two of my talk with Dave Martinez, the marketing director for the Big Peach Running Company. As I was saying in the previous episode, going a little bit more, I would say off script, but not really, because I'm taking this podcast in different directions, not just talking about the arts, but a lot of other things. This is one of my interests is getting into running and doing races. A little bit of my history is that I've been into doing the races now for now we're hitting the eighth year now. I've been running for many years, but didn't really get into the races until about 8 years ago or so. What my first big race was a 10K, and it's the big popular one here in the Atlanta area called the Peachtree Road Race, which is a great first race if you're ever going to get into doing it. That's a great first race to do because people don't take themselves too seriously. Nobody's going to shove you out of the way. That's why I didn't do races for a very long time because I was like, I know I don't need this. This is just a solo activity. But my partner Cami had inspired me to do it. I was like, challenge accepted. I'm kind of one of those people that does that. So I really enjoy doing it. And so here is part two.
I had, going into that start line, I think I was like, yeah, I don't really want to do this.
Yeah,
I was like, my heart wasn't into it. I think I was just mentally and physically sort of kind of burnt out. And it was my first DNF. I started, it was out and back out at Duncan Ridge. It's Duncan Ridge 50K. It was out and back. And because it was out and back there, you really had no choice, right? And you have to come back to the start line. It's not, it wasn't a loop or anything. There wasn't any cut throughs or anything like that. But I was probably maybe about 10 miles from the finish, and I was already kind of struggling. It was cold. I was tired, and I came across another runner who
yeah,
was injured, and he had fallen. And that's one of the things about trail running. You're going to
fall.
fall. You're going to trip. You're going to fall. Especially
Yeah.
once you start getting tired, you stop picking your legs up. You start kind of dragging them, and that's where they get caught on a root or a rock. So he fell and bashed his knee pretty badly, and I didn't know to what extent it was, but he was moving very slowly and just having a hard time. And I think there was like three of us sort of kind of running fairly close together, and all three of us kind of stopped. Hey, are you okay? You need any help? And he's like, no, I'm fine. I'm fine. And I don't know whether it was because the fact that I needed an excuse to stop, but I was like, are you sure you're okay? He talked to him for a little bit, and he convinced me to continue and that he was okay. But I was turning around to head off. He said something that made me stop in my tracks, and he basically said, I don't think I'm going to get out of here.
Yeah. Yeah.
And at that point, I was like, all right, he is in worse shape than I am. Mentally, he's in worse shape than I am. Physically, I can't evaluate that, but mentally, he had already kind of given up and thought, and he was ready to. There was I think a Forest Service road, within eyesight that he was going to take. And he's like, oh, I'm just going to go there and hopefully someone will pick me up. I was like, do you know where you're at? Do you know what direction you're going in? He's like, no. I'm like, you could be heading in the wrong direction, and it could be hours before he shows up, and you could be miles away from anyone that could help you. And so I said, let's stick to the trail. So I walked with him until we got to the next aid station, which I think was 3 miles away. So it took us easily, I think, over an hour to get to. And got there, and the guy there was already sort of kind of packing up and getting things ready, so he would be able to give him a ride back to the start. I'm like, great. Put a warm blanket on him, gave him something to drink, and made sure he was okay and was taken care of. And it was my intention then to, regardless of what my finish time would be, was to continue going forward, even though mentally I was kind of over it. And the volunteer asked me, says, hey, do you want something to drink? I'm like, well, yeah, I'm kind of cold. Do you have any like hot soup or broth or something like that? He goes, I don't. I've got coffee. I'm like, great, I'll take coffee. I just want something warm. And he hands me a styrofoam cup, right? And I grab it in my hand, and I can't keep it steady.
Sure.
My hands are shaking because of the cold. I had
Yeah.
not realized that I was probably had early onset, hypothermia.
Sure.
And couldn't keep warm. And at that point, he's like, get in the car, threw a blanket on me. So that was my first DNF,
It
and,
happens.
you know,
Yeah.
and I ended up seeing the one guy that was injured. I saw him like I think 6 months later at another trail race, and yeah, he was injured. I think he had a stress fracture of some sort, got diagnosed or whatever. And yeah, we ran into each other, and he was very grateful that I was able to kind of help him out. And I'm like, that was worth it. I was like, that DNF, it was
Yeah.
worth it. If I
It's
helped him
totally
out,
okay.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, it
So
happens. Yeah, you don't make every single race. There are a few that I had a crap down on. It's not a great word to use, but there are a few that I haven't shown up to, and it's totally fine. I mean, you got to listen, like they always say, always listen to your body. So, how are your knees doing throughout all this? Like you were originally saying years prior, like, oh, my knees were always bothering me. Did you just work that out? Did you ever have them x-rayed?
no, never had them extra because I never had an issue. And it's one of those things that I learned. And the only time I had an issue, to go back, when I was training for my first marathon, which happened to be the Atlanta Marathon, back when the track club started doing it. And it was the first year that I think it was 2011 when they did
Hmm.
it at Atlantic Station.
Yeah, I heard they did
And
it
and
then. Yeah.
and they had the one at Atlantic Station. There was a marathon. They did a relay. Since then it's now the 10 miler or something like that became, and they don't do one in October. But at that time, it was they did it for a couple of years. They had it at Atlantic Station in October. And so I'm training for it. And a couple of weeks beforehand, I think I was doing like an 18, 19-mile run. Um, and I think it was supposed to be a 20-mile run total. And all of a sudden I start having pain in my knee. Side of
Mm.
my knee starts. I'm like, what is going on?
Yeah.
And it was the IT band, you know, and at that point I didn't know much about it. I'm like, I'm so close, I mean, race is like 2 weeks away. I'm like, I'm just going to rest it, and you know, and it'll work itself out. I just probably just overtraining. Ran a little bit, just to keep my running up. I didn't completely take time off, but it was all recovery, and that was all part of the training plan. Was there would be, a kind of what, there's a term. It's not recovery. It's another term I forget. But it's the same thing. You decrease your mileage, and you rest
You
up for the
taper
big day.
down. Is it
Taper.
taper?
That's the word. Taper.
Yeah.
Yes. So it was a taper. Yeah, I was going in a taper anyway. So I go out feeling great in my race, and my goal was to finish under 4 hours. I was kind of hoping for 350. And so I lined up ahead of the 350 pace group and head out. And I'm like, I'm feeling great. Everything's going really well. And I remember coming in at mile 16, and we came into Piedmont Park. And
Hmm.
so I like, they had porta potties there, like perfect time to take a pee break. And so did that, came out, and I started running. And because I had stopped running, the IT band like basically seized up. It tightened up
Ooh. Ooh.
like bad.
Yeah.
And I hobbled the rest of that way. The last 10 miles was hobbling. And it was at that point just kind of like, okay, well, let me just stay ahead of the 350 group. And then the 350 group, I'm like, well, let me just keep them within, eyesight. As long as I can see them, I'm doing okay. And then they would slowly disappear. And then it'd be like the 4 hour group would come up. I'm like, same thing. Oh, once I just need to stay with the 4 hour group, and then they would go away. And then by mile 21, I think I was over on Lindbergh, coming up to Peachtree Road. And I was like, I don't care. I don't care
Yeah.
about my time. I just
Yeah.
want to
Just
finish.
want to finish.
Get me
Yeah.
off of this course. And, hobbled, and, and it was one of those things where it's like, it's Atlanta, so it's hilly everywhere.
Right.
And I was already dreading this because I knew the course, because I used to live over, off of Deering. So if you know where
Yep.
the Amtrak station is,
Yep.
there's that climb that goes all the way up towards North Side, and then you loop back around. I think it's Bishop, and you go
Hmm.
into the backside to 17th Street to Atlantic Station.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm you're running down Deering from the Amtrak station, and you see the hill, and you're like, oh, this is going to suck, you know? And so here I am. I'm like, I'm walking the thing. And I had people there that were kind of cheering, and I knew someone there, and, and they were taking photos. I'm like, I'm not even going to fake that I'm running for this photo. It's not worth, taking,
Right.
it hurts and so hobbled in, and at the finish, like someone asked me, from the friends that they're like, hey, so how do you feel? I'm like, oh man, I feel horrible. They're like, so when's your next one? And I'm like, right
You didn't
now
think
is
about
probably not the best time to ask me that question because it's definitely going to be based on how I feel right now. And that could possibly change, but I'm not in the frame of mind to answer that, except to tell you honestly right now how I feel. And so it was after that, getting back to your real question about the knee, where I started kind of like, okay, well, what is an IT band? What, what does that do for you? What's part of that is the whole kinetic chain, in your legs and all that. So I started doing some research and reading up and learning a bit more. And that's where I started kind of realizing that it's, and I see people they say they have an IT band issue, or IT band injury. And, we sell braces and bands and things to help, with that. But what a lot of times what we tend to do, and this is what I tend to realize back then and apply it now when, especially when I was working in a store, is that we tend to put band-aids on the symptoms. We try to address the symptoms and not the root of the cause, right? So by putting a band around your knee helps alleviate some of the pain, but it doesn't resolve the root cause of that. And so I was able to do some research and find out that potentially the root cause of that is muscle imbalance,
yeah,
and
yeah,
that it ends up being it's in the glutes. It's, you're seated all day, you're not working out your glutes, you're not doing enough squats or, leg presses or whatever that is that's creating that muscle imbalance. The fact that also, the road isn't completely flat, you tend to run and it's sort of off camber a little bit, especially on the sides, that causes that side of the leg to maybe, overextend over, the other leg. And so after that, it became, a point where I wanted to sort of be aware of those things. So I started doing more leg strengthening exercises. So that ended up going away. I never had issues with the IT band for several years. It wasn't until recently, I think, that I started feeling that little kind of niggle right there in the IT band. And I was like, okay. I was like,
yeah.
not doing enough leg exercise. Need to get back into doing some squats. And so now when I feel that, I go in and try to address it so that it doesn't come back up again. So there's things like that I think that we as individuals either, tend to, and I think sometimes it depends on the doctors you're going to see. If you actually see someone that is aware of these issues, that is that knows runners and they're
Right.
aware of how to address these. If you go to a general practitioner, they're probably not going to know. They're just like, stop running. You don't need to be running. It's bad for your knees. But if you go to someone, physical therapist that actually treats runners, they'll be able to diagnose the issues and provide corrective exercises to rehab and to so that you can recover, but also down the road is to be preventative, right? To prevent that
Right.
injury from reoccurring. So that's one of the things that I ended up doing. So I don't have problems with my knees anymore. I mean, I'm sure down the road as I get older, that's always a potential, but right now I have no issues with my knees or anything else. So, yeah.
Yeah,
So that's
that's
how I got
important.
over it. Yeah.
It really is. I'm probably going to be doing some PT in a few weeks. I've had basically what's called a sports hernia. It's not your classic inguinal hernia. I actually had a CT done, everything. I was like, because I felt like I was having GI issues maybe with that. I think it was just kind of nerves feeding off of that. Like, oh my God, I might not be able to run anymore. And I'm getting nervous about this. Once I saw my general practitioner, we did the CT, I really calmed down. And then I just saw my orthopedist who said, just, don't stop running. It's not the running that's doing this. You go to PT and you'll have the regular exercises. So you are actually treating it, not just like putting band-aids on it. So PT is very important.
Yeah. And I mean, for me, because, like I said, once I started, getting back to how I got into running and eventually crossed over into running, working for Big Peach Running Company, is that, I needed that sort of a career change. I needed a steady paycheck. And at the time, because of the economy, that wasn't really happening. I didn't have enough freelance jobs to help pay the bills. So I was like, I need something, steady. And I enjoyed the culture and the people, at Big Peach Running Company. So I'm like, all right, let me start working here. So I started just kind of, part of it was the interest that I had in running, and having access to other people that helped motivate me and inspire me, but also access to equipment and gear and knowledge from people, people that had more information than I did. So being around individuals like PTs that would come in or things like that, I was able to ask them questions or talk to trainers and, become a little bit more educated about how I train and, how to prevent some of these things. And so that's kind of where I really was able to benefit in my, I think my athletic resume in improving. So, little by little, I started kind of growing with the company, got promoted to be a manager, then a general manager. And then after several years, I think it's about 7 years ago, that's where everything sort of kind of comes together, because during that time period, I was still doing a lot of things that from my past, whether it was, design work, print work, video, things like that, that I was kind of volunteering, kind of throwing into the mix and saying, well, what if we did this? What if we did that? And, I was doing photography as well professionally. And so, taking photos of different things and sharing them with, the things that we were doing for Big Peach, and writing a blog, for my photography business, and just doing all these things that, created my own website and just things that you do as a entrepreneur. Right. And all that kind of crossed over to her. All of a sudden it's like, hey, we've got a marketing director's position that's open. Is that something you'd be interested in?
Cool.
And I'm like, absolutely. Because now it takes all these things that I've done over the last 30 years, all these different skill sets from video production, camera editing, motion graphics, photography, writing content, blog post, social media, all that, was able to kind of bring that all together into my current position and the current career that I have. And it's still an ongoing process, still a learning process. And so that sort of kind of brings me to where I am now. And so looking back at it, it's like there's so many different paths and that I could have taken, or directions that sort of kind of led me to where I am right now. So I'm grateful for all those experiences that I had, because feel like I'm in a much better place. Even before the pandemic, I was working from home and had, a lot of flexibility to train, to do different things. Now we've gotten, like I said, I've always sort of kind of considered myself more of a cyclist more than I have, a runner. And it's sort of, for me, it sort of kind of changes by season. Back when I was, doing 50Ks, I would call myself more of a trail runner, and then, other times I call myself a triathlete, and so it sort of changes. And now I'm sort of kind of back to that. I think I'm more of a cyclist, partially because we've now started selling bikes. Two of our stores are selling bikes. So those two stores are referred to as Big Peach Ride and Run. So kind of combining two different athletic type of endeavors that share some similarities. Like I said, for me, I do both. I enjoy both. So, and there's probably people out there that do the same. But once again, it comes to the quality of service. And I think a lot of people, we found that many people that come into our stores the first time as a runner are very intimidated. Just as you said at the beginning of this podcast, that when you talk to another runner, you think they've been running since like high school, and that's really not the case, right? And so a lot of people feel intimidated, thinking that, well, I'm not a real runner. I just started running, or I'm going to be judged, or and I'm not going to feel comfortable. And once they come in, they realize that's not the case. The way that they're treated, the way they're greeted, the way that we talk to them, we don't talk down to them. We talk to them and we explain the process so that they feel invested in, the fit process. And we explain as much as we can without getting overly technical, right? So, for them, that ends up being a great experience. And I feel the same thing happens in the bike world. People come in and they need a bike, but they don't know much about bikes, right? And it can be very intimidating, especially when you're talking about spending several $1,000s on a bike. So they may feel, well, I'll just, buy some at like Walmart or something. And or some big box store, and they may not get what they want because they haven't had that personalized service. But at the same time, going to a specific bike shop, they feel, well, I don't race bikes, and everyone there, I'm sure, races bikes on the weekend, or every day, and they're, ride, to and from work every day, and probably putting 1,000 miles, a week. So once again, getting into that aspect of that side of this new business is to reduce that intimidation. Based on our service, I think people will know that, they're not going to be judged. They shouldn't be intimidated, that we're here to help them and provide them a great experience so that they can enjoy, a new activity if they're new to cycling, or if they're already a cyclist, that they just get the best bike that they possibly can to enjoy it even more. So I find myself now doing a bit more cycling, only because I have different things that I'm sort of kind of looking in and getting into. You can see behind me, I've got a bike. That's
it's a nice
a
one.
recent, it's a recent one I just got a few weeks ago. I actually bought it used. I got a great deal on it. It has less than 200 miles. So it's a brand new, it's a 2023 bike with less than 200 miles on it. So it's almost brand new. And it's a gravel bike. And I don't know much about gravel. I've done some mountain biking. I've done road biking. So this is sort of kind of like a right smack in the middle. Yeah. And for me, it's been an interest in the how gravel bike has become this new category within cycling that is such a groundswell of participants and awareness around it. And I'm intrigued by it because I'm like, why is that? At first I was like, well, I get it. No one wants to ride on the road. Riding on a gravel, type of road where there's less traffic, it's just going to be safer. And I figured that was the appeal of it.
Right.
And then I find that there's these huge gravel rides and gravel races, and it's this festival type of environment that is just fun. It's welcoming, and it's less intimidating for people. And I'm like, I think I want to be a part of that. I want to experience that. I want to kind of, learn a little bit more about that, and just really, once again, it's about the fun part, but it's also for me now in almost everything that I do. Like, I don't train to race. It may be a race that I'm doing, but I'm training for a new experience. So I tend to not want to do the same race or races over and over every year, because really what changes from year to year? Not much. It's the same course. And what do you,
it's boring that way.
Yeah. What are you doing? You're chasing
variety.
a time.
Yeah.
And how fun can that be? But what if you use, your training to say, well, I'm going to race, but I'm going to race somewhere else. I'm going to race somewhere different. I'm going to travel to a race in a place I've never been before, or a course I've never seen, even if it's, somewhere within the state, but it's different. So that's what I did this year. And I kind of put it on my calendar because I wanted to get back to trail running and doing some things, and even some gravel riding, to kind of cross train for what I'm doing. So this year in June, I signed up for what would be my A race, I guess, for the year, for the first half of the year, is to do the Leadville Trail Marathon. And it is probably one of the hardest, if not the hardest, marathon, because it starts at 10,000 feet. So it's the highest point in I think it's the highest point in the highest city. Leadville is the highest city, I think, in the States, in the US. And you're running with an elevation gain of 3,000 feet. So you're running up to 13,000 feet of elevation. So you're already going to be oxygen depleted. The air is thinner up there. So that in itself is going to be a challenge. But at the same time, it's Colorado. You're running in the mountains, the Rockies. So for me, that's an experience to reach a summit and then turn around and come back down just to look out at a peak. To me, that's worth it. And I've been out to Leadville before, so I know kind of what to expect, but I haven't done a race. So to do that in a small town like that, to me, is like very unique and very appealing, because once again, it's a new experience. And that's what I'm looking for, is that new experience. I'm seeking adventure. I'm seeking something different. And so I've got a couple trail races that I'm doing to kind of help build me up. Next month, I'm doing a brand new race called Coyote Ugly. They've got a 30K and a 50K up in Ellijay. And then I've got a trail marathon up in Helen, Georgia in April. So that'll get me to that distance. Once again, as a way to motivate to keep me training and kind of, keep consistency in my training by having things that I'm constantly having to like, yep, got this on the calendar. I need to run. I can't wait to the last 4 weeks to train. Right. So that's sort of my strategy. At the same time, I'm using cycling to cross train because cycling is less impact on the knees and the whole body, so it's easier to do that. I do feel that by using a proper pedaling technique and pedal stroke, you do tend to train your legs to turn over at a certain cadence and train those muscles as if they were running, because you're using the same muscles to do it. You're just not doing it with the impact. So it makes you a more efficient runner. And so I'm doing that. So putting a lot of miles on the bike, at least right now on the indoor trainer while it's kind of cold. And then when it's nice outside, I'll go out for a long ride. But then, like I said, gravel is something that I've been sort of kind of interested in. So I just signed up to do 6-gap gravel. So 6-gap, if you're a cyclist, you know what 6-gap is.
Yeah.
It's like these 6 gaps. So it's one of the toughest, courses to ride. So it's up in, like, I think you do hit Helen and you did, Hog Pen and some of these other, huge climbs. And that's typically on the road, and they do 100-miler out there. And as a matter of fact, back, if you go back like almost more than a decade, I think, when there was the tour to Georgia, when they had the professionals, they were doing these rides, and because it was one of the toughest rides to do, I guess, in Georgia, but also here on the eastern side of, the country. And so now the 6-gap, that puts on the same 6-gap, road rider doing a gravel ride. So I'm signed up to do the 60-mile with 7,000 feet of elevation, gain. So it's going to be tough, but once again, I'm going to be able to train myself not only aerobically, but my leg strength as well, to kind of help cross train for that Leadville Marathon. So I'm using cycling as as to complement my running, so that I don't feel like I have to run every day, but I don't have to also recover every day or take time off from training because I'm cycling. I can cycle every day and maybe still take a day off a week and still throw in some running and not feel like I need all this recovery time. So it's a little experiment of mine, no science behind it. There's probably someone out there, a personal trainer or an athletic coach would be like, no, that's the wrong way to do it. You should just run.
Oh,
but I'm an experiment of one. I'm like, after Leadville, I'll tell you if it worked or not.
Yeah, I think that it really should. I think they do complement each other. I love using the bike too as well. I've had a Fuji for years now, and I really do like it. I don't like sharing the road though. That's here in the Atlanta area, people are not very good. It's hard enough even to run in Atlanta, much less that. I mean, how many times have you gone by cars and you could see from the road how much they're not paying attention? So it's even worse when you're biking. You can't see them coming.
Yeah, it's one of those things where, I mean, I think over the last several years, even though I enjoy cycling, I have not done a lot of cycling simply for that reason. You really have to travel maybe an hour outside of the city to ride in areas where you feel safer, in areas where definitely a lot of cyclists, tend to ride. And that area there is familiar. Yep, there's a lot of cyclists in this area. So they tend to be a bit more aware of you. But you do get the occasional, individual there that, get off the road, whatever, or honking at you. But for the most part, I found that those areas are safer. But to drive an hour out of town to get a long bike ride, I mean, that's a 2-hour round trip, throwing a 2-hour ride or even a 5-hour, a 3-hour ride, and you're talking 5 hours, that's half your day, for the most part. So, is that something you want to do? So for me, what has changed and what has helped me, as far as I hope has helped improve my cycling, is riding indoors, with things like, programs like Zwift, where you hook it up to I've got a Wahoo kicker, so a smart trainer, so you can go in there and have this kind of virtual, environment to where you can ride with others, and race, and challenge yourself on various courses. And you still get the same benefits of, you get that same type of resistance based on the course that's being presented. So if you're riding up a hill, you get that additional resistance, and you can use tactics like drafting and things like that, as well. It tries to take that into that consideration onto this program. Even so, now that they're devising new products to help you steer the bike, on the course, so they have a little, I guess it's a Bluetooth type thing that you put under your front wheel that allows you to kind of use your steering on your bike so you can steer on the course. Wahoo just released something that you can mount to your handlebars that's like paddle shifters that allow you to, slide over to the left, slide over to the right, and create some realism so you can truly then have some more like real life type of experience by steering and drafting or cutting corners and things like that, as opposed to just sitting there and just pedaling. So it's interesting. I think that's going to evolve. And I think especially during the pandemic, when a lot of racing, especially in Europe, came to just didn't happen. I mean, Tour de France didn't happen during the pandemic. I think it was only last year, or the year before, where they kind of started back up. So they had a virtual one. They had virtual races where they had pros doing that. So that opened up a whole new category, and now it's like this esports type of racing. Even I think, I think some of the teams, professional teams, have now used Zwift to recruit some of their new riders. So every year they do a special week or two where they, anyone can participate, but based on that, they kind of get people to sign up and say, hey, you want to be a pro? Then try your hand at it, do the workouts, and depending on your numbers, you get invited to a camp. And you ride with some of the pros, and you could end up being on a professional bike team, racing in Europe, which I think is kind of cool, because previously the only way you could do that is having a huge long resume, starting out as as a junior, probably racing in junior type of categories, all the way through doing crit races and traveling. And now you could be a 25-year-old who just maybe has the athletic genes and maybe just good physical fitness, and on an indoor bike, and all of a sudden you can end up riding the Tour de France 6 months later.
Yeah,
that's kind of cool.
It is.
It's not for everyone, but that's kind of cool to see that.
Oh, it totally is. So Big Peach it's a great running store. How many units do you have now? It's a different kind of running store too. It's not like you're just going to go in there and buy shoes. It's like you do gait analyses and all kinds of things. You really talk with the customers. So here in the Atlanta area, I know a lot of communities have these kind of shoe stores, running stores too, and cycling. How many units do you have?
So we have, at this point, we have 9 locations. We've added 2 over the last year. We have most recent location is coming. And then the year before that, we added Cartersville. So we're really kind of expanding more into the outside of Atlanta. But we have, location Alpharetta, Brookhaven, Decatur, Kennesaw, Marietta, Midtown, and Suwanee. In addition to the Cartersville and Cumming location. So, I mean, it's one of those things that, for us, we realize, that not everyone's feet are the same. So when people ask, well, what's a good shoe? What shoe do you recommend? It's really, like we recommend all of them based on a variety of different things. One, what's your foot shape? Because that will make a difference. Not all shoes are created the same with the same foot shape. Some tend to be a little bit wider, some tend to be a little bit narrower. Some tend to have a deeper heel cup. Some have a little bit wider in the heel. So fit is important. And that's the first thing we tend to focus on is a fit. Measuring your feet, to make sure you're in the right size. But a lot of people are surprised when we tell them that they're in a much larger size than they're used to. Because most people are kind of going off of their dress shoe size. Right. And if you're going by a dress shoe size, you're going to be in a very small running shoe for you. Yeah, you may be able to fit your feet in there, but if your toes are hitting that front of that shoe, that's going to be painful down the road. That's going to, bruise your toenails. You're going to feel that pressure on your toes, especially when you're running downhill, because you don't run downhill in dress shoes, so you're never going to feel that. But in running shoes, you're going to feel that pressure, and so you're like, why do my toes feel sore, or why are my toenails turning black? That's a reason why. It's you're bruising your toenails, and I mean, worst case scenario, you lose a toenail, it'll grow back.
I
But
did.
why do that? Yeah, why do that?
Yeah, it's
And
terrible.
there's some people that feel that that is a badge of honor of running
No.
a marathon, or an ultra marathon. It's like, it doesn't have to be a badge of honor. If you want it, then that's fine. But there's ways to avoid that if you get properly fit. So making sure that the heel doesn't slip, making sure you've got enough room in the toe box so that it doesn't cause any issues. A lot of times, and this is primarily, I think, for women, because women tend to, get shoes more for fashion, right? They look good on their feet, and a lot of these shoes have very pointy toe boxes. So ladies squeeze their feet into these shoes, and guess what? Your shoes are not pointy. They tend to be very broad at the ends of the toes. And all of a sudden, if you start squeezing your toes inward, that's where we start having issues like bunions,
Yeah.
and your feet don't look like they're supposed to look because of years, decades of squeezing them into shoes that, are not really designed for a foot shape. They may look good, but they are not necessarily built for comfort, or for function, to allow proper function of your feet. So we look at all those things. We look at, arch type. If you have a higher arch, we're going to look for shoes that we know tend to be maybe a little bit narrower in that area. That's going to provide a little bit more arch support, or that are just naturally have more arch support. And then we also, basically we want to talk to you. It's like, what are the current issues that you're having? Is it knee pain? Is it shin pain? What are you using them for? Is it for walking? Is it for running? Are you training for something? Because those can make a difference in the type of shoe that we would recommend. If you're, doing your first 5K versus using it for walking, that could be a completely different shoe. They may fit the same, but we may recommend a different shoe. And then, of course, we want you to try the shoes in the store. Maybe even take them outside the store and run in them, so you know what it's like to actually, run in them or walk in them or jog in them, on concrete or asphalt. Because that's truly, until you get that impact and you feel that impact in your feet, you're not really going to know how that shoe truly feels at that point. And then, is it comfortable for you? And then, based on your feedback, we can say, okay, well, then yes, this works for you. Or, if this is bothering you, then let's eliminate that. Let's bring something else in. Let's try something else. I mean, ideally, you want the shoes to feel like you're not even wearing shoes. You don't want to notice the shoe. You want it to feel natural on your feet. And if your feet, the shoe feels natural on your feet, then that's probably going to be the best shoe for you. Now, we look at things like pronation, type as well. And, for those that don't know what that means, is basically everyone's foot pronates. It just depends on the degree of pronation. And what that is at the point of impact, right, is how far that ankle kind of tends to roll in. Some people it rolls in a little bit, some people it rolls in a lot. So for someone that's brand new to running, we want to provide as much of a stable platform as possible. So if you're brand new to running and you tend to overpronate, then we want to create a more stable platform by getting you into a shoe that's going to be more supportive, that's going to try to reduce some of that pronation. It's not going to eliminate it, and that's not the goal is not to eliminate it, because that's something your body naturally does. What we wanted to do is try to support that, so that it eases some of the discomfort that you're going to get while running. Okay.
Sure.
So if it feels natural on your feet, then great, regardless of pronation type, because here's the thing is that, and a lot of people don't realize this, and it even people that have been running for a while, they'll be like, oh yeah, I got, into this, I overpronate, I'm in this type of shoe, and, that's a shoe for me from now till forever. Right. The thing is when you start out first, you're, running, your muscles and your tendons are not used to that type of impact, not used to that type of activity. So they're going to need additional help. But if after years and you've been consistent with your running and your training, it's quite possible that your legs are now strong enough, and the tendons and the bones and everything else, and are strong enough to where you can move away from a very stable type of shoe and move into something that is maybe lighter weight, maybe less supportive and less stable, because your feet now have built up that tolerance to that impact, to that activity. So those are things we take a look at for individuals that are coming back. And it's like, let's take a look at your running, again, do you still need a stable shoe? How does this shoe that's less stable or a neutral shoe feel on your feet? Because that could work for you as well. But the idea is, and studies have shown that the stability part isn't really quite as important as to how the shoe feels on your feet. But the shoe has to feel comfortable on your feet and natural on your feet. And sometimes it's going to take a while for a different shoe to feel that way naturally if you're very new to it. Think of it like breaking in a leather glove in baseball, right? It's going to feel stiff. It's not going to feel great.
Sure.
But you break it in, all of a sudden it just feels real soft and supple and just molds to your hand and just feels great. Same thing can end up being with a different type of shoe, because your feet have now been accustomed to that impact, to that. But for individuals that maybe, they do the Peachtree Road Race and that's the only race for the entire year, then yes, if that's the only time you break out your running shoes, then yes, whatever shoe you're typically in is probably best that you kind of stick with that shoe. But we're there as consultants to help kind of guide you, to what's going to be a best option for you, but also for those individuals that have maybe started out doing a 5K and they're moving up to a half marathon or marathon or a triathlon or an ultra or trail running, or they have some sort of, like I said, a niggle where it's like, oh, it's an IT band issue or it's shin splints or something else. We're there to kind of, once again, consult them and say, well, it could be these things, but you probably should see a specialist. You probably should see, a physical therapist, or it's nutrition that they're having issues with. Those are things that we're experienced in. And, it's not a perfect science because everyone is individual, but we can certainly make recommendations to things and products that's going to help them based on our own knowledge and experience. Whether, it's like I said, if you're doing an ultra marathon, what type of hydration pack, how do you want to carry your water? Do you want to go handheld? Do you want to go carry on your back? And there's a lot of different things like that, we can obviously help. And once again, it's for us to guide people to make the best decision that's going to work best for them. And that's what they're there for. And that's one of the reasons why, a lot of people says, oh, you're a salesperson or something like that. And like it's a title, but it's not our title. We refer to everyone that works in our store at whatever level as a guest advocate, because that's what we do. We advocate, we're an advocate for them, for every individual that comes in the store. We want the best, for them to continue to, whether it's running or walking, but to, live a healthier and more active lifestyle. And a lot of times people stop running, like I did myself, because it hurts, it's painful. And some of that could be because you're not in the right shoe. So if we can get individuals into the right product and the right gear, that's going to make, a physical activity easier for them, then we're an advocate for them, for that change, for whatever, goals or, interests that they may have, and also hopefully improve their health as well.
Yeah, a lot of good, cool swag in there too. One big thing is I just got my phone into an Otter box, and I'm looking for something to actually, so I don't have to keep taking it out of the Otter box every time, which I've been doing for years. I hate doing that.
Yep.
You guys don't have anything like that to like actually just go around that, it clips on.
We do, yeah.
Like,
I mean, there's, I think the brand is Nathan that we carry, and they sell a lot of different accessories. And one of the things that they sell is, phone holders, so that you can strap them to your arm, and there's a variety of different things. I mean, some people like putting them on their arm. Some people use like a little pack around their waist, like a little Velcro type of pack that's stretchable, so you can put a phone there if you want to, prefer to wear it there as opposed to on your arm. So there's a lot of different products that we can suggest for that. But yeah, I'd say bring it into one of the stores, bring the phone, and let's open up the packaging and see if it fits.
Yeah, it's a really cool store. I love going in there. I usually go to the East Cobb one. I picked up
Hmm.
my race numbers there sometimes for some of the races near there.
Yep.
So some really cool races near there too. I did the Possum Trot there last year,
Yeah.
which is by the river, by the Chattahoochee River for those who are in the Atlanta area. But thank you so much for dropping by. Big Peach Running Company. Where are you on the web, and where can we find your podcast?
So yeah, it's bigpeachrunningco.com on the website. And like I said, we've got our Brookhaven and Midtown stores are our two ride and run shops. So inside the perimeter, and yeah, you can find us there. Find us on social media as well. Just search for Big Peach Running Company, and we'll pop up on any search browser, or just Big Peach, and we'll pop up. And as far as a podcast, yeah, it's Big Peach Ride and Run. I mean, you can find the podcast almost on any platform at this point. I know we're on the Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon, Google. So yeah, just do a search for a Big Peach Ride and Run podcast on any of your favorite podcast app, and yeah, we'll pop up.
It's a lot of fun just being
Yep.
a runner and everything. I wanted to always include this with my podcast. And so thank you so much for participating.
Well,
I
I
really
appreciate
appreciate
you
it.
asking. Yeah, I enjoyed it. It's yeah, a lot of times during the podcast, I get to learn and talk about other people and kind of get inspired by them. And sometimes I forget that I'm one of those individuals that I can help others as well through my own journey and what I've gone through as well. So glad to be on the podcast.
Appreciate it so much. We'll see you soon.
All right, thanks, Bob.
Well, I hope you really enjoyed it. And like I said, this is kind of more of a self-interest kind of thing. So until next time, I really hope you're enjoying the podcast. Peace out.